Brief introduction here. I'll just start with myself. You know, I'm Bill Melton. I ranch down here in the Muscle Shell and try and help out with the CMR working group and work with Liv to help plan these meetings and work with the planning group. So that's me. And Liv, I'll let you introduce yourself and then I'll go over to Steve and work our way down the list.
Yep, I'm Liv Holt. I'm the coordinator for the Missouri River Conservation Districts Council. And through that, coordinate this group. And I'm the one that's constantly dropping into your email inbox. So thank you all for being here.
Yep, very good.
So, hi there. I'm Steve Wanderaas, Chairman of McCone Conservation District, and it's nice to see and hear from you all today, even if it is virtual. And I'm greeting you from Vida, Montana today, where the sun is shining and the wind's blowing a little bit.
Just a little bit. Well, that's good. I like a little bit. Daniel, go ahead.
Hey everybody, Danny Kinka. I'm the Wildlife Restoration Manager for American Prairie Reserve, where I also kind of run our Wild Sky Ranching Affiliate Program. Interested to join today because I don't know a whole lot about CRP, but my understanding is that there's some programs being offered particularly for farmers that, well, obviously, but I mean to keep you know, wilder corridor patches, so you're not farming right up to the edge of a creek or something like that, but leaving these kind of like weedy areas that are really, we know are really important connectivity areas for wildlife. So like I said, this is not something I know a whole lot about, but I'm hoping to learn more today. So nice to be here. Good to see y'all.
Very good. Dick, we'll go to you.
Want me to help you?
So everybody get on mute if you're not talking. So Dick, you're next.
Yeah, I'm Dick Iverson. I'm with the Richland County Conservation District and also sit on the Missouri River Council, the one that Liv runs. And I'm just coming here from west of Sydney. Just going to sit in on your meeting and see what's going on.
Well,
Thank you.
Good to see you, Dick. And Laura, I'm going to go down to you and I got to apologize. I really wanted to be on the meeting last night with the book club and just got hung up. I'm sure it was great, but go ahead, Laura. Just introduce yourself.
We missed you last night, Bill. It was a great discussion.
I bet it was.
We're on round 2 of our Rancher Stewardship Alliance book club discussion on For the Love of Soil by Nicole Masters. So those have been really fun discussions. My name's Laura Nelson. I'm the project leader for Rancher Stewardship Alliance.
Very good. I'm going to jump up to you, Martin. The screen keeps changing for me and I'm sure I'm going to lose my flow here, but I'm going to go to you and then Les Rispin, I'm going to go to you next.
Okay, I'm Martin Townsend. I think I met most people on here in my previous position as a sage grouse initiative biologist in the Malta NRCS office. Now I am the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance Conservation Coordinator as of last month, hired by Pheasants Forever, located here in Malta, Montana.
Very good, thanks. Les?
Yeah, I'm Les Rispins. I'm the Farm Program Chief and Acting State Executive Director for the Montana State Farm Service Agency. We administer the CRP program. I'm here today with Shanan Smiley. I think I saw her in the meeting. There she is. And we just wanted to be here to share and to answer questions if we could.
Great, looking forward to it, thanks. Carrie, jumping over to you. You're on mute, Carrie. Oh, there you go.
Yep, sorry. 2 screens were getting me. My name is Carrie Hess. I'm the district administrator for the Petroleum CD. I also work with the Missouri River Council and Winnett ACES. Also listening in is Mike Lucas with NRCS. He is our district conservationist here in the Winnett field office.
Very good. Steve Riley, well, you're next, and then Brent, you'll follow.
Hi, Steve Riley with the Northern Great Plains Joint Venture. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, we cover parts of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Basically that northern piece, as you might imply, of the Northern Great Plains.
Good, thanks. Brent?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent Smith. I'm the coordinator, for lack of a better term, of the Winnett ACES here in Winnett, Montana. Our area of coverage is pretty much the Muscle Shell Plains, which has 5 different counties in it. Not all the county per se, but majority of most of them. And we're a grassroots started group by our producers, Bill, here is one of the main guys that got this group started. So thank you to Bill. And I'll be on today to maybe be able to offer some ideas of how ACES can help producers in our area, you know, find some funding possibly to maybe get that CRP rolled over into something other than, you know, recropping it or something to that effect. So we don't have a lot of money right now in that arena, but we can always try to help sponsor and go find some. So it's good to be on here. Thanks for the invite, guys.
Thanks, Brent. Shannon, please.
Hi, I'm Shanan Smiley. I'm the state specialist for the Farm Service Agency for conservation programs. So CRP is one of my programs.
Well, glad you could come educate us. Look forward to it. Dusty Olson up there in Garfield.
Oh, here I am. Okay. Hi, I'm Dusty Olson. I'm the administrator for the Garfield County Conservation District. I'm out here in Jordan. And Bill, I missed, was there a grounding question?
Just who you are and why you showed up.
Oh, well, I try to make it mostly regularly, so here I am.
Very good, thanks. Diane Black.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Black. I'm the administrator here at the McCone Conservation District in Circle. We regularly try to attend these also, but McCone has quite a large number of acres coming out of CRP in the next few years. So this meeting is, I guess, particularly interesting to me.
Yeah, you guys kind of triggered this. So I'm going to go to Paula Gauss, please.
Hello, I'm Paula Gauss. I work with CMR Refuge in Fort Peck and just listening in to get some good information.
Thanks, Paula. I'm going to go to you, Paul. Shoot, I haven't heard your voice for a while, so I'm looking forward to hearing something.
Yeah, it's been a while. Hi, Bill. Hi, everybody. Paul Sanavy with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the project leader at CMR National Wildlife Refuge Complex. And I'm here because I like to come to these things. So thanks for carrying on during COVID and having at least a virtual connection. It's good. So thanks.
Very good. Good to see you. David Wood.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm an ecologist with the U.S. Geological Survey. I try to make these when I can, but it's not frequent enough because I always learn something. And so today, excited to learn about sort of how the decisions are made on the ground instead of just seeing numbers when I look at CRP. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Ken?
Hi everyone, my name is Ken Plord. I'm the upland game bird habitat specialist for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks up in Region 6. So I cover a number of the counties in the CMR working group. I deal with a lot of the Fish, Wildlife and Parks programs that deal with CRP, including some of our cost share and lease programs. So just want to listen in and see what's going on elsewhere in the region.
Yeah, well, you should have some interesting things to offer as well. Thanks for joining. Autumn, please.
Hi, guys. I'm a coordinator of the Healthy Watershed Consortium grant, and I'm on here today, invited by Liv, mostly because I help out with the technical assistance side of the CRP program last summer and met several producers that were faced with expiring CRP. So just trying to educate myself on what options they could have that are available for them. So here to listen and learn. Thanks.
Very good. Very good. Dave Walter.
Yeah, I'm Dave Walter. I'm the game warden in Jordan, Montana. I'm just listening today to see what you guys are up to.
Excellent, thanks. Terry Self.
Yes, this is Terry Self out of Lewistown, and I'm just checking in to see what's going on. Hadn't been to a meeting for a while.
Yeah, that's for sure, Terry.
And I just learned how to cut it on, so I'm happy with that. Okay.
I haven't heard your voice for a while. Thanks for joining. Stacy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Stacy Barta, State Coordinator for Rangelands DNRC.
Nice to see people, though I miss going to the meetings in person, and I'm looking forward to the day when we can all do it together.
Love your backdrop, Stacy.
Thank you.
Alexis.
Hi, everyone. Alexis Bonogofsky. I come at this from two angles. I manage the new agrarian program for the Quivira Coalition. So I manage an apprenticeship program for ranchers, and we have about 22 ranches in Montana, some of them in these counties. And then I also just started as the Sustainable Ranching Initiative Manager for World Wildlife Fund about 3 months ago, and I'm still learning all the ins and outs of the programs that WWF has. So I might not be able to answer all the questions that you might have, but I'm doing my best, and I'm going to talk about some of the resources that we have available for ranchers. And I think that's good.
Great. Well, it's good to see you. It's been a while. Our apprentice is coming back in about 3 days. So, Catherine Whiteman, please.
Hi, everyone. Catherine Whiteman. I work with Steve Riley at the Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, and I'm here to learn and to see if there's ways that through the joint venture we can help support your partnership and your work.
Great, thank you. And last, Robin Baker, please.
Hi there, Robin Baker with Senator Steve Daines' office in Great Falls. Always a pleasure to hear what's going on with the group. And I also have an announcement that we have hired a new person for the position of along the High Line that will be covering at least Phillips and what's the other Phillips and Blaine counties, and he's here today to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks to you both. It's good to have you guys show up at these things. So thank you. Well, did I miss anyone? I think I got everybody on the screen here. If I did, please holler out. If not, Liv, why don't you share quickly what we got in front of us, and then we'll let our speakers get started.
Yeah, I think the agenda speaks for itself. We've got a lot of great folks on today. This meeting did come about because of the issue that McCone County was facing. So Steve Wanderaas, the chairman for McCone County Conservation District, is going to start off about, what the problem is and why we have everyone else here to talk to us. So Steve, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so here in McCone County, we decided to hold our local work group meeting a couple years ago. And of course, McCone County is 75% range, so range issues always stand out and take the lead. And so yeah, we realized then we had quite a bit of CRP about to expire. And then it wasn't very long, and we realized we got the numbers, and it's like, holy crap, it's 65,000 acres. And about half of it expired last year already. And now within the next 2 years, the rest of that's going to expire. So they were starting to get traffic in the office there in Circle about ways to keep these lands, and also some of the marginal farmlands around, retain those in grass for grazing mostly, I guess. And then, of course, we realized we didn't have money to help, with infrastructure mostly. And then, of course, our office, we're really, really lacking in capacity in the office there in Circle. But that is about to get better, thanks mostly to NRCS at the current time. And I believe Veronica from our field office is going to be on here. So I'm not going to steal any of her thunder about what's going on with the staffing issues there in McCone County. And yeah, so then we reached out to Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, and they've attended our meetings several times, and so far we haven't got any real solutions to this. We've got with NRCS, we've written a TIP, a targeted implementation plan, and that seems to be key to moving ahead. And yeah, I think anything else will probably get covered by the folks that know more about the issue than I do. So maybe I'll just kind of stop right there and turn it over to the next person. Either I'm unprepared or somebody allowed way too much time for me on this schedule. But I'll hand it over to the next person. Thank you.
So Liv, who's coming on next? Do we have an order here?
Sorry, Bill. Our next speaker is Shanan Smiley with the State Montana FSA office in Bozeman to talk about what options they have in their shop. So I will let her formally introduce herself and her position as well.
Hello again, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen, and I have a PowerPoint presentation to go through. Sometimes this works on Zoom and sometimes it doesn't. So let me know when you can see me, if it's coming through okay.
Looks great, Shanan.
Oh, good. All right. So options in the Farm Service Agency for re-enrolling some of these acres that are expiring or have expired. That's really what I'm going to go through. I know it's not going to fit for everyone. Let me see if I can get this to progress. It's not working. There we go. Just a brief history. CRP came about because of water erosion and wind erosion of soils. It got so bad that it actually kind of clouded the skies in Washington, D.C. and got their attention for Congress. So CRP became an FSA program in 1985. So we've had it around for quite a while. And of course, as time goes on, it's changed and morphed. We've learned as we've gone what's worked and what hasn't. The main objective of CRP is to cost effectively assist owners and operators in conserving and improving the nation's natural resource base. And cost effectively has really become increasingly important to Congress. CRP contract holders of today are being held at a much higher standard than in the past. This is part of the problem for re-enrollments coming up now. There have been several different tweaks, let's say, to the rules. One of them being Congress really wants to focus and incentivize water quality and wildlife. So as part of that, they've wanted us to look at our seeding mixes and what species of grasses are on the ground and improve those stands for wildlife. So the last couple of years, there's been a change. They don't want us to be using kind of overly competitive introduced species of grasses, but we know that's going to be hard to phase out because a lot of folks got into CRP by seeding to crested wheatgrass and smooth brome. So with these signups the last couple of years, the standards have changed. They're now required to have 50% or less of the stand as crested wheatgrass or smooth brome. So if they don't, if it's more than that, then they'll be forced to renovate that stand. And in CRP, the Farm Service Agency only pays 50% of what that costs. So especially now in our financial times, that can be a pretty expensive venture for folks. So in general, we're protecting the soil, water quality, and wildlife resources. And there are several different types of CRP, and each different type addresses each of these categories. So we have several different type of signups and practices. Our general signup that's going on right now, this is in Montana, the biggest I guess, participation in the state. This is permanent cover. In our state, it's almost primarily grass. We do have a few contracts that are trees, but it's a little harder to grow trees in Montana in most areas. And it's your basic either introduced or native stands is what most producers enroll in, but I'll go through some of the other options. And then continuous is what's really focused primarily on water quality. There are also a couple of different practices that address wind issues as well, but most of those practices are wetlands and riparian areas. We also have for wildlife state acres for wildlife enhancement. This has been broken up into both general and continuous practices. Under general, if you enroll under SAFE, there's a competitive advantage. In this sign up, you make your offer. There are different points awarded for different things, and then it's ranked nationwide. And then some get accepted, some get rejected. So if you're willing to offer under a SAFE practice, then you get more points, which means you're more likely to get accepted. And then we have continuous practices that are specific to different species, but that focus on wetland and riparian areas. In Montana, our SAFE projects focus on pheasants, ducks in the prairie pothole, sage grouse in the sagebrush grasslands, and then several songbirds in the declining grassland birds, SAFE. So here's a map of where our SAFE areas are. So in your focus area, you really have a combination of all three. The brown is the declining grassland birds. The green is the sagebrush grassland for sage grouse. And then the red is the pheasants winter cover and prairie pothole area. So there's a good possibility that if folks are willing to enroll in SAFE practices and really focus on wildlife, that they can get re-enrolled into CRP with the points. Then we have a completely different type of sign up called Grasslands. This one really focuses on keeping acreage in permanent cover and protecting it from being converted into being an annually cropped acreage. So this really takes a look at the threat of conversion, where it's located. Flatter ground along streams, of course, gains more points. It's on a point system, much like general sign up, and goes through a national ranking system. So now that we've covered all the different types of signups, I'd like to go through all the different practices. So the most popular by far is CP1, the introduced grasses and legumes. These are the easiest to establish and the cheapest price for seeds and so forth. CP2 is our permanent native grasses. Then we have a couple of tree practices. Permanent wildlife habitat, this includes shrubs, so it's not just grasses. And then a wildlife food plot, this has to be paired with another practice. It can't just stand on its own, and it's limited in size. But this gains you points also in sign up if you're willing to do a food plot. We also have rare and declining habitats for the state. There are different areas and different habitats depending on where you're at. And then we have our safe practices. They really mirror what are, the 1 is the introduced grasses, 2 is native, 4D is that wildlife habitat, and then food plots also. Then we have a pollinator habitat. This has to have at least 1 forb flowering in each kind of phase of the growing season. So we need to have something blooming pretty much all summer long, which can be a little bit difficult in some areas. Then to switch to our continuous practices, we have field windbreaks. So if folks are interested in planting shrubs and trees to break the wind, we'll definitely pay for that. Grass waterways, this is where you have washouts through the field every year. Planting it to grass helps keep that soil from eroding away. And this is engineered by NRCS. Then we have shallow water areas for wildlife. I don't think we have any of those in this state yet, but it's certainly a possibility. We can also pair wildlife food plots with continuous practices. And then contour grass strips, which we have a few of, shelter belts, which we have a few of, and living snow fences. This is more something that's not yet used in this state. I think it definitely could be. It's used a lot in Minnesota. Then we have our salinity practices to address some of those saline soils. Looks like I accidentally have CP9 in there twice. We have filter strips, riparian buffers, and then wetland restoration. So these might be some important practices that could be an option in some of your area, whether it be in the floodplain or outside of it. We have cross wind trap strips, farmable wetlands, and it has to have a buffer around it for that one. We have a couple of marginal pasture land practices for wildlife habitat and wetland buffers. We have habitat buffers for upland birds. Duck nesting habitat. This is primarily up along in the northeastern part of the state. It depends on, we have to have so many pairs of brooding ducks to qualify for this one. Then we have a couple of the wetland practices as part of SAFE. There are a few farmable wetland program constructed wetlands. And pollinator habitats can also come under continuous. And then we have a new practice that's called prairie strips, which is pretty much strips of pollinator habitat in between fields of agriculture. Then for our grasslands practice, this is really a working lands program. The usual haying and grazing policies for CRP do not apply to this program. We don't require cropping history. It just has to be existing grass in order to sign up for this. So like I was talking about the species requirements of 50% or less of crested wheatgrass and smooth brome, this program does not have those requirements. We don't require any renovations. So this is a an option for folks if they're not willing to do those renovations, but they still want to stay in CRP and get a payment. However, it's a lower payment rate, but if you get to operate how you normally would, at least with this program, you'll get paid a little bit for using your grazing and haying ground. So the payments that come with each different sign up, I'll start with the highest payments first. Continuous practices are paid at 90% of the National Agricultural Statistics Survey rate. So they go through and survey, figure out what the typical leasing prices are for different areas, and then set a rental rate dependent on that information. So we set that at 90% for continuous. Then if it's a new enrollment, they get 32.5% as a sign-up incentive payment right at sign-up. And then once they get, if it's a new enrollment, after they've prepared the ground and seeded everything, they'll get a 20% practice incentive payment, and that's on the amount of the cost share, so half of that establishment costs. There's now a rental incentive payment with this sign up this year of 10%, but this only applies to certain practices, not all of them under continuous. And then for all CRP, our cost share rate is 50% to establish cover, and if there happens to be any supported infrastructure that's required for some of these practices. So as a comparison, for general sign up, the rental rate is a little bit lower. And for CRP, it really is, for both continuous and general, it's dependent on what types of soils you have. So it's the 3 predominant soils in your area. There's a payment rate for each type of soil. So for continuous, you're paid at 90% of that rate. And for general, you're paid at 85% of that rate. There are no other incentive payments for general. There's just the 50% cost share for establishing cover and any additional infrastructure that might be allowed with what practice you're installing. For grasslands payments, these are set at 75% of the NAS rate. And just to give you an idea of what this means for your different counties, for the last sign up, we don't yet have what the payment rates will be for this sign up coming up this spring. But in Fergus County, it was $7 an acre. Garfield was $4. McCone and Phillips, McCone was $6. Petroleum was $5. Phillips was $4. And Valley was $6. So they're certainly not paid a lot. But like I said, if it's how they usually operate or would operate the land themselves, it's a little more than, I guess, nothing. For this program, you're required to, if you're grazing, do rotational grazing. So if you need additional fencing for the internal, we don't do boundary fence, but if you need internal fencing to help support that rotational grazing or any watering facilities as part of that, we'll pay 50% of that cost share. And then another option is our transition incentive program. This one, if you happen to have a contract that's expiring this fall, you can choose to transition it to an either to sell or lease to a veteran beginning farmer or socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. And you can either return to production as sustainable grazing or crop production for this program. The stipulation is it can't be to a family member, so you can't pass it down through the family. It has to be someone that's not related. You have to have a long-term lease of at least 5 years or selling to them. And what you get out of it is you get up to 2 additional years of annual rental payments after the contract expires. And I didn't touch on this, but for most of our contracts, they're 10 years long. There are a few that have the option of being 15 years long for general and continuous and grasslands. So the transition incentive program is only payments for 2 years, but it's at the rate that the expiring contract was being paid. And some of the contracts that are now expiring were being paid quite a bit more than what the rental rates are today. So this is a good deal for some folks. And that's all I had for today. If you have any questions.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I think we can just, people could just raise their hand. And I'm trying to get the full screen up here. Okay. So if people have questions for Shanan, call her away. I have 1 or 2, but I'm going to wait. Any questions?
So just a couple of
Okay, go ahead, Les.
So just a couple of comments before we go to questions. The current administration has paused the current CRP sign up to reevaluate a couple of things about the program. We have no idea what that looks like. We do know specifically they're looking at rental rates to see if they can improve those. And they're looking at refocusing the program around carbon sequestration, those kinds of issues. And again, this is pretty standard in the change of administration where they use discretionary authority in the various pieces of legislation to refocus some of these programs. What's different this time is that we were in the middle of a sign up. And so we don't know when this sign up will end or how it will end. And so anyway, just to know that Shanan and I are trying to do our best to tell you what we know today. But what we know today could be old news by the time we get to tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Les. Congress had a goal for what they wanted to be signed up for CRP this year, and we're 4 million acres behind what their goal was. Part of that's definitely the lower rental rates, but it's also, I think, the increased demand on the producers too and their inputs. So we'll see what they come up with for changes, but hopefully it'll be good.
Other questions?
Yeah, Shanan and Les, this is Dick Iverson. I'm old enough to remember the first sign up back in '85, and I think we had 150 applicants and got 2 accepted. The average rental rate, for instance, in Roosevelt County was about $20 an acre for those 2. They raised it the next sign up probably 3 weeks later to 30 something, and they got over 100. So I think it's pure economics. When they lowered that rental rate, it was a real disincentive. And when the average crop lease is going from $40 to $50 an acre and FSA's in that 20 or less in our county, they're not going to get any. And so I'm glad to see Congress did halt it, because poor FSA is spending a lot of time doing paperwork that probably isn't going to amount to anything. Nobody's going to sign up. And so appreciate your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Dick.
And then I was just going to ask Shannon if you could expand a little bit. You mentioned the infrastructure a couple of times and the 50% payment rate for that. Could you expand on what that infrastructure could include and how that's looked at through CRP?
Sure. So depending on the type of practice, especially for continuous practices along riparian areas or wetlands, most of the time we want to keep livestock out of those areas. So we can pay to install fences and also have an alternate watering facility rather than giving them access to the stream or the wetland. So that could include pipelines and tanks, installing wells for some of the practices. It really all depends on your area and what practice you're applying for. Some things are allowed for some things, and other practices don't have much of any infrastructure allowed for us to pay on, rather other than just the establishing the cover. So it's really kind of site specific and practice specific. But hopefully that gave you an idea of all the different options.
Yeah, I think it helped. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Other questions?
Shannon, I have a question. Thank you for that presentation. I was going to ask if you would be willing to share those slides, just because it's a nice bulleted list of all the different programs that are offered, but it sounds like that's subject to change based on what Les is saying, or the details might change. And so, I mean, I'm sure your website has great resources for this, but can you recommend a specific page that has a nice list breakdown of all those myriad programs you offer, where it would be possible to drill down, find more information about each? Or do you recommend just calling your local representative to learn more about this? I see Les shaking his head.
We do have a fact sheet page, and there are a lot of different fact sheets for the different types of CRP signups. Those might be helpful. So you could just look for Farm Service Agency fact sheet website. But I sent Liv my slides, so I think she'll be sending those out to everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you.
There are unique aspects of CRP in every state. There are certain determinations that FSA, NRCS, and conservation groups in each state make relative to CRP in that state. And so none of that is summarized anywhere on a national website. Those little decisions around specifically, species of grass to be recommended for a different practice vary by state. And so that when you get into that level of detail, it's pretty tough to find it on a website anywhere.
Yeah, thanks, Les. But if that's the information you're interested in, all of our county offices have that information and they can share that with you.
Oh, go ahead, Steve, please.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, I thought Dick's point was really kind of cutting to the chase. This is a lot due to economics, right? Both the rental rate and when you start talking about establishing higher diversity mixtures of cover and the burden that puts on the producer. And that, that's bit of a moving goalpost through history. And I'm old enough, again, to have worked on the 85 iteration of this, and at the time was Farm Bill coordinator for the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks in Pierre. And it's, through history, it's been moving around based on not just conservation issues, as we would all like it to be based on, but on a lot of other related factors. And some of you will remember that, part of what drove the 85 Farm Bill was actually, there was a pretty big crisis in wheat country in general. And not only were farmers and ranchers looking at significant bankruptcies, but it was at such a rate that the banking system was in trouble as well. That was really the, those things, not just the conservation, but throw on the other things that raised the red flag high enough to set a goal of putting 45 million acres into CRP at the time. And, a lot of resources were spent, and it was, for the most part, as has been mentioned, they pulled out all the stops. If the rental rate was too low to get people to come in, they raised the rate. More recently, we've seen kind of a tug and pull between how do you balance the rental rate with encouraging people who probably are on the cusp of getting out of farming and ranching to actually sell their property, so that other people who are trying to either get in or expand their operation can afford to buy it. And so there's been a big push of late that has driven the decision has been made to kind of err towards the side of caution, so that some of those lands can transfer to different owners, and that's manifested itself in lower rental rates. It's also as a kind of co-equal part of that, the more expensive cost share for higher diversity plant mixtures, that's become part of that discussion. We could save a lot of money if we didn't have that out there. But what it really has done is made it harder for people who may want to move away from something like crested wheatgrass or smooth brome into a more native system, so that maybe down the road they can convert that back to a viable pasture. They haven't really been able to do that. So hopefully, as Les said, that we've got the pause right now. Hopefully those things are going to really be addressed, so that more people want to come to the table, both to enroll or re-enroll, and to upgrade their plant materials, so that when they're done, whenever they decide they want to be done with the program, they have something that can go back into grazing. So hopefully that's useful information and not just something everybody knows.
That was actually quite a bit, Steve. And so, Steve Wanderaas, and Steve went, I know whatever you're going to ask, do it. But I'm curious, when you look at all these programs, I know there's also a parallel effort, and I know ACES and RSA, and Brent and Laura might weigh in. The programs they're doing is trying to actually get these into active grazing units that aren't necessarily tied to a program. They just can make that transition economically into, profitable grazing ground and doing diversity. So, Steve, I'm kind of curious, as you go beyond whatever you're asking, is like, what's the outcome you and your folks in McCone County, if forgetting what's available, but if you could just dream what you would like to do with those grounds, what would you like them to look like?
Well, here, I guess if we could just, right where I live, I gotta say that this farmland is mostly productive enough to farm. It's pretty good farmland, but the big amount of acres we're talking about is in southern McCone County, and it's more highly erodible down there. And and I think livestock fits well into most of those operations down there. So somehow to make that work. And then just a comment I wanted to make is shelter belts, if you're going to have livestock, they kind of fit in. It's probably on the overall picture kind of minimal. But right now we have such an incredible mule deer population that I don't believe I would try to establish a shelter belt, trees or shrubs or anything like that. And I have visited with Region 6, was kind enough to return my call. And I visited with FWP Region 6, and I just said, give out more tags and make them easier to get. And so I just wanted to offer that. Was all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, good perspective, Steve.
So from our perspective, the rental rate piece is an interesting conversation, right? We started out with flat rates in 1986. It all paid the same in the whole county. And then somewhere along the line, Congress got the sense that we were paying more in CRP than land was actually worth. And they came up with a system to create a separate rate for each piece of real estate based on the productive capacity of its soil. What that did was about the same time, we switched the focus to water quality. And that moved CRP out of Montana and into the Midwest. Since first of all, their productive capacity was way above ours, their rental rates went way up, and water quality was getting better points, more focus, have more weight in the evaluation. And so we moved a bunch of CRP out to the Midwest, but we had remarkable success with improving water quality out there. And so the focus of the program, or that has remained a focus of the program. But that the whole issue of how do you incentivize the poorer soils into this program without paying more than they're worth, right? And how do you do you go out and pay more for the good soils? Should FSA pay more based on the productive capacity of the soil, or should we have a different way of determining that? My personal opinion is we got off the tracks when we did that. We incentivized putting the good soil in, and I actually watched people in McCone County come in. I was a CD there. I watched them come in, evaluate the rental rates on different pieces of soil, put the good soil into CRP and keep farming the bad soil. So we made a mistake there. And as you guys have a chance to interact with, congressional representatives and stuff like that, you want to be thinking about how that rate system is structured to incentivize the property that we really want in CRP. And I'm not sure what that answer is, and people smarter than me will piece that together. But the system we have now is not perfect, not by any stretch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because you nailed it, Les, that, the program took a big shift about 10 years in, where we really went away from trying to deal with wheat country, which was mostly wind erosion, and put a real premium on water erosion and water quality. And that was to move the money frankly into the Corn Belt. And it did make some real big compromises, because originally we were trying to take the worst stuff out, and then we went to taking out, in many cases, pretty good soils. And if you start talking about, this administration wanting to sequester carbon, probably the best and cheapest way to sequester carbon would be to go back into some of those places that are the poorer soils that are more at risk, and plant in, back a native prairie, and put it into a grazing system that is, sustainable. That's going to be I can't think of a cheaper way to sequester more carbon than that. So perhaps that plays in our favor as we go forward.
Interesting conversation. Other questions? I'd like to, if Brent, you're willing, or Laura Nelson, if you're willing, maybe share with people what you guys have been doing with the NIFWIF dollars, because I've been kind of fascinated with what these two groups have done. It's almost like a locally driven EQIP type program that really responds to regional situations, because it seems, listening less to you and Steve Riley, that these programs are really quite different in terms of their adaptation to a particular region, and when you're competing over, the Midwest and the West, it's just, it no longer makes much sense, how money flows. And so how we regionalize, a significant amount of dollars, and I think TIP does that. But maybe Brent, first, and then Laura, even though maybe Laura first, you guys had more experience actually doing it. No, go
Bill,
ahead.
I was just gonna let you know, that's kind of what I planned about talking about in my.
Oh, okay. I apologize. So Liv should have stepped on my foot, but she can't do that. You know.
I was just gonna say, you guys should just listen to Martin.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm not fully prepared here. Apologize, Martin. So,
Thanks for giving us a chance though, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it a
so
really
this
quick
is just
segue.
sort of an unplanned segue, Martin.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great segue. So we could probably just start with you, Martin, if you want to kick it off, the work you're doing at RSA and with Pheasants Forever.
Sure. So I guess I'd step back just a little bit and talk more about what RSA is for people that might not know. So RSA, based here in Malta, we work primarily across Phillips, Blaine, and Valley counties, basically north of the river. Getting the right screen. The mission statement is ranching, conservation, and community is a winning team. So everything we try to do, we try to make have a benefit for each of those three segments. And the biggest action that we're taking is what we call our conservation committee that I'm now coordinating. And that group exists basically to try to find funding to take on conservation issues that are kind of like Bill led into, that are completely relevant for this area. So we've been working primarily in the grassland birds and big game migration areas of wildlife conservation, but then trying to take those wildlife conservation actions and making them have a ranching and a community outcome that's beneficial as well. The committee started in 2017. This is a wrap up of what we did in 2020. We had projects that counted up almost $200,000 for on the ground project funding. And with that, we modified 28 miles of fencing for wildlife friendliness. We helped seed back 4,400 acres of cropland to perennial cover. And we installed 10 new tanks and 18,000 feet water pipeline and 5 new wells for different grazing system projects. Basically what this conservation committee is it exists as basically a hub to find as much relevant information, relevant programs, and relevant agencies that are beneficial to local producers. So the committee exists of people from all these different organizations that have programs and functions that are beneficial to ranchers that apply to here. We have meetings once a month where projects and concepts can be brought before this group, and people from these different organizations can weigh in and help and come up with ideas that might be useful in going forward and making an improvement on that ranch. And since 2017, through this committee, we worked with 38 different family ranches and impacted more than 50,000 acres. Most of our grants, almost all of them, have come through NFWF, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. With that money, we've pulled in around $3.3 million since 2017. But the idea of this committee of having everybody come together and work together is we can spread that impact out across more agencies and groups. Almost never do we have a project that's funded out of one agency or program. We try to balance it between projects so we can make those dollars go further and do more. So we've managed to leverage that at around 5 to 1 between other agencies and then rancher and in-kind contributions as well. And that's just a slide of our contact information. And I am new here as of January. So if you haven't seen me in this position yet, this is one of the first few things I'm doing. So start there. But then I talk about what we've done with CRP is in general. Most of our NFWF phases that we've gotten, we've just applied for our 5th phase of funding through NFWF. A huge target of those grants has been taking CRP and converting it into grazing lands. So it basically is incentivizing grazing to increase the chances of that land staying in grass for the benefit of wildlife, grassland birds, and ranching. And by getting that land into a grazing land, CRP is a great program. I'm employed by Pheasants Forever. Pheasants Forever throughout the nation is hugely involved in getting people into CRP for the benefits it provides for wildlife. Everyone is very appreciative of what CRP does for soil and water conservation. it takes lands and it converts them into grasslands or wildlife habitats, but it doesn't always convert that land into grazing working land. So that's kind of the problem that we're facing here, is how to take those lands that for their entire working existence have either been cropland or CRP and nothing else, and providing basically another alternative that with added grazing infrastructure, they could become grazing lands. For the most part, we find when CRP goes back to cropland, it's because it lacked the ability or the interest to be grazed. So for the most part, it's usually because it didn't have stock water or fencing. So most of these projects that involve CRP for us are involving putting stock water and fencing on this. And like Shanan talked about, the USDA doesn't do border fencing for the most part, so NRCS or FSA. So we've worked largely to just establish border fencing on a lot of these tracts that don't have a border fence. And then water development being the biggest and most expensive part that does honestly drive the amount of acres we can accomplish through this, depending on well depth and what it would take to actually add stock water to these different pieces. That's mostly what we do here with RSA, really, and we try to not treat it as just CRP. We try to not work on just the CRP land, but really incorporate those acres into a ranching operation so they become part of the overall plan and not a separate piece that is always looked at as like a programmatic separate piece, and really incorporate it into their grazing system and however we can do that. So I guess with that, I would turn it over to somebody else or take some questions.
Thanks, Martin.
I'm thinking that since ACES and Brent kind of oversees that, could maybe give a perspective on the other side of the river, what they're doing, and then we could open it up to these somewhat similar programs. Questions? So
yeah. Before Brent starts, I just want to encourage everyone, before you lose your thought, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box as well, and we can always circle back. So with that, we'll move over to Brent at Winnett ACES.
All right, thanks, Liv and Bill. So I didn't bring one of my PowerPoints today. So with ACES, just kind of a background, you know, in 2016, it's when a bunch of producers in the area got together and started having conversations about how we can protect our traditions in the area, you know, ranching, keep it in the families, not have the absentee out-of-state land buyers come in and take that out of production, that land out of production. So that was the main start and focus of the group. And it was all volunteer based for a couple of years until in 2019, they applied for a NIFWIF grant and got one. They got a little bit of capacity funds in it. And that was part-time funding for my position. And it's constantly morphing. And we have one individual, Laura Nolan, in our group that she's like Bill. She's got big ideas and is always trying to figure out that next angle that we can keep going with. So with that NIFWIF fund, it was able to fund me for, you know, a coordinator for ACES. And a lot of my time is spent actually working in with the conservation committee, because we have metrics that we have to meet within that grant. And that was, you know, acres directly affected for improved management, fence modifications, wildlife friendly type stuff. And also if we're able to get some marginal cropland or just cropland put back into native grass or a high percentage native grass. So with that, when I came on board, we built up the conservation committee with our partners and got a lot of interested parties and NGOs and agencies and everything. And we try to have everyone's input so that there is enough ownership in it that it makes sense to everybody, especially producers. We have producers that are on our committee also. Bill is one of them, and so on. So with that, with our first round of funding, we've had actually 3 phases in that funding that we have been mainly focused on water infrastructure. Like Martin was saying, that's a big cost to folks to try to get ground into, you know, grazing rotations and whatnot. So that was our biggest round of folks that came to us when we went out with the application process. that and some fencing to get that rotation going on that ground to make it more efficient and more productive on the ground. So we've went through phase one. We had Northern Great Plains help hop in and help fund us with that one. So we were able to get 3 great projects done. That we also had some seeding that was involved with that with marginal crops. So that you have seeding in and you have ground, but you have no water and you have no fences for that. So we were able to help put money into that and get that ground into production. So phase 2, we're currently in right now, and we've had one of our projects in phase 2 completed. We have 5 producers total in that one, and one of them is completed, and the other 4 have either broken ground in some way with the nice mild winter we were having, or they're about ready to start once, you know, spring breaks for us. So that, and then now with phase 3, we went out again to try to use up the remaining amount of our funds. And partnerships are so important with us that we had 2 great applicants come in that we had money for 1.5 projects, but not for 2. And RSA, with some of their funds that they have through sage grouse or through sagebrush, they were able to give some money down to help the project too. So it just kind of goes to show that, you know, working with our partners is really important, financially, but also just professionally and technically. We use Partners for Fish Wildlife for our technical side very much, and the NRCS up here at the office. They're always mapping and giving us, you know, input and engineering everything for us, and it's really handy. So that's the niche that we're kind of trying to fall into down here with our conservation committee. Is we're looking for those $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 projects that don't really fall into a huge equip program, and hopefully we're able to grab something and get it turned around after cultural and everything with a pretty quick turnaround. So that's a niche that ACES thinks we're able to fall into. We haven't had anyone approach us regarding CRP yet. You know, in Petroleum County, there's not a lot of CRP in this county. So it's a lot of grazing ground, and then there's, you know, a little bit of crop, of course. So, but we do have 4 other counties that we're able to have, you know, folks, if they're interested, approach us. So the way we would work is we do have all of our NIFWIF initial funds have been allocated for projects. We did receive another NIFWIF Spirit of Conservation grant that's focusing more over in that conifer encroachment and invasive species management, which that invasive species, that could be, you know, your knapweed or spurge, but it also could be a crested wheat. If we have a producer that has some pretty aggressive crested wheat in an area that they're needing to try to manage, they can, with some fencing and water infrastructure, they could really put an intense grazing program in place and try to manage that crested wheat. So we have that. And of course, like Martin was saying, they went out for their 5th one. We're going out for our 2nd one in our Northern Great Plains NIFWIF grant. And we're hoping we can get that, and that'll be more funds for on the ground for more water infrastructure, more wildlife friendly fencing and modification. And hopefully we can get some, you know, dollars for seeding, you know, moderate or cropland back to a native mix. We are also able to, with help from the World Wildlife Fund, before Claire headed out, she of course did a lot of work for those guys. And I'm sure Alexis is, you know, going to be in the middle of this too. With World Wildlife does have funds available that we could help, I guess, get everyone together in that sense, to where $60 an acre flat rate that they will help pay for putting a cropland back into a native mix. You know, the native mix needs to be with them, the bottom end, which is not the most desirable, is 60%. They'd like, of course, to keep it up higher than that, like anyone would, if we're trying to put it back to something that's going to have some resiliency in this area. So you need to have those natives. They're here for a reason. So they hold up well. There's, of course, you know, some species in that is a no-fly list in a sense. You know, alfalfa, they're not going to pay for alfalfa, crested wheat, smooth brome, items like that. So that's all stuff that we would discuss with the producer and work through that whole process with our conservation committee. And once that's all said and done, we'd have the transferring of funds get started around and start getting the producer going with their implementation of the reseeding and spraying and management. And of course, they'd have to rest it for a couple grow seasons, which for a lot of folks we know around here, that's tough to try to give something a rest for 2 growth seasons with their, I guess, livestock operation. So that's one issue we've been running into is guys do want to do it, or gals or producers want to put stuff back into native, but trying to give something a rest for 2 growth seasons is really tough in the rotations to be able to not have that acreage available to them. So that's kind of in a nutshell with our conservation committee and ACES. I could talk for probably an hour straight, huh, Bill, about all the other stuff ACES is doing, but we're going to focus in this arena for now. So,
no,
yeah.
very, very good. Both you guys did great. I'd like to, entertain any questions for, Martin or Brent. If we are out there.
I'll just share some thoughts that were put in the chat box for those who weren't looking at that. Dick asked a good question that when I was just starting with MRCD, asked a couple of times. You hear NIFWIF said over and over again, and you start to wonder what that stands for. So that's National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So thanks, Martin, for answering that question in the chat box. And then Steve Wanderaas asked, is there any chance RSA could expand south of the river? And it sounds like Winnett is doing very similar things in that neck of the woods. But if anyone at RSA wants to comment on that, you are more than welcome to.
You want me to, back off. It's our area, guys. No, we're constantly in conversation with the RSA. I mean, they're kind of father to us. They're taking care of us, making sure we're doing everything right. We aren't reinventing the wheel in a lot of situations. We borrow, beg, and steal from the RSA on some things, and I think we're trying to work towards blending our lines a little bit, blurring them in certain arenas. I don't know if the conservation committee arena will be where it's at. The education and outreach, workshops and things like that. That just seems to be like a really good avenue that we can work real strongly together with the RSA and ACES to make ourselves more efficient, use our capacity to a maximum. And like everyone says on this call, capacity is an issue. Within the government, capacity is the issue, and we have the issues. Everyone has the issues. So where we can gain efficiencies by helping each other, we're going to do that. And we're having those conversations weekly, it seems. I mean, we have attorneys and accountants constantly looking at different options for us when it comes to just simple agreements, just to make sure that we're covered, they're covered, and if it's in all of our best interests and the interests of our producers and our memberships, of course, too. So does that kind of answer the question with that?
And I'd add to it a little bit. Like you said, Brent, like we're trying to very much work together on things that are very regional things that we can accomplish. But I think the strength and the usefulness of both of these groups is having very localized and specific resources available to our producers. So trying to not make that area so big it becomes ineffective. So I think that's the benefit of having both of us doing our own conservation committees as well.
Right, and we're always trying to build relationships. And I mean, if you try to work, if you guys on here are ranchers and producers, very skeptical and cautious individuals, and you can spend 5 years trying to build a relationship, and one person comes in that doesn't play at the group that well, and everything falls apart. So relationship building is very, very important. And Martin hit that on the head, that we get too big, we aren't personal anymore, and that's not what we want.
So Martin, could you bring up your slide with your partnership group?
Yeah.
I want people to kind of look at this a little closely here and appreciate just how much diversity is in this group, because this is the kind of power of these local efforts. But
struggling for a second, but there we go. Yeah, and this is a little old. Honestly, we have some logos to add to this, but this is really what, for the first few years, we tried to focus on, was getting all these different groups to the table, because we all knew, and when I say we, there was a bunch of partner biologists with different affiliations and different organizations that worked around here that kind of knew of other programs in generality. but trying to get people that knew those programs specifically at the table. So when we had a project on the board, we could all look at it from an informed stance and really be able to put it towards the best program that would meet that producer's needs as efficiently as possible. So we've done a lot with like NRCS and putting people towards either like RCPP programs or tip proposals or things like that. We've worked with Fish, Wildlife and Parks and their migratory bird program and tried to add that into different projects and proposals. So this really is the strength of what we do, is acting as that hub to gather all that information, because time and time again, as I talk to people that have things they'd like to do in their places, they're not aware of most of the agencies or programs that exist out there. So trying to corral all that information into a useful space is really what we're after here.
Very good. So actually, I'm going to direct a question to either you, Les, or Shanan, because, you know, FSA's not in that list, but obviously the work you do complements what these two different conservation committees are trying to achieve in their local regions. And I'm just curious your thoughts as policy changes and you guys try to be, you know, more flexible and adaptive. What possibility is there to get more conversation between FSA programs and what these two kind of local experiments are looking like? So I'm just curious, you know, your guys' feedback on what you're observing, and how could FSA be a more adaptive, flexible partner that might be able to complement some projects that are being funded by, you know, a variety of NGOs as well as ranchers themselves? You know, how do we expand leverage, I guess, is my question.
So FSA is in a little bit of a, the programs we offer are all national in scope, right? And so our ability to build those at the local level is limited to some fine tuning we can do around the edges. And most of those decisions are made in conjunction with NRCS, and most of those are run through the NRCS State Technical Advisory Committee, which includes most of you or representatives of your organizations. And so our ability to flex programs to local situations is just severely limited. There just is only, you know, fringe elements of CRP that we get to be involved in. There isn't a great deal that we can do. There is some room in CRP, like our safe areas and our CREP areas, and Shanan's your expert there. But we can designate certain areas around certain conservation topics under some of these sub-programs in CRP, and a working group that has a focus on a specific conservation issue in an identifiable region can put together a plan that gives people an opportunity to participate at a higher level in that region. It's sort of almost building your own CRP program. And but that really is a grassroots driven thing. We don't go out and make those things happen. We respond to a group that comes to us with a proposal, and we kind of work them through it. Shanan, do you want to add some to that?
Yeah, just briefly with the new declining grasslands birds safe project. We got, I guess in our fact sheet, we name Winnett ACEs as a potential additional source of cost share so that it helps offset some of the 50% that's the producer's responsibility for establishing the practices, and some of our other partners too. I mean, it's not just Winnett ACEs, but those are really the only options we have. Like Les said, our state specific programs are really the only areas that we have ability to partner.
Very good. We do have other panelists, and so Liv, do you want Alexis to come on next?
Yeah, Brent had mentioned World Wildlife Fund, so let's go to Alexis next. Welcome.
All right, thank you guys. So Martin and Brent are right in terms of, I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the different programs that WWF has and then answer any questions that I can. But Brent and Martin are right in terms of our, we have pots of money to put into reseeding marginal cropland back to grassland. And my goal is to funnel as much money as I can to local groups and conservation districts to put that money on the ground where it makes sense. And so there's going to be another pot of money coming in to do even more of that in the next couple of years. And so I think thinking about where those funds would be best spent in what places. So, you know, transferring that money to conservation districts, ACES, RSA, you know, Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, those sorts of groups that can put that money to best use is what I'm hoping to do. And it's going to be significant amounts of money. And I think that we can increase that. You know, I think that money will keep coming in. And so just for something to think about. The other program that I've got 2 slides on that I'm going to show you now is fairly new. I came into WWF about December, and so Claire has probably already talked to you guys a little bit about this program, but it's called RSVP, which is Ranching Systems and Viability Planning Network. And it, I've been working the last 3 months to put a little bit of structure around it, but really the program is meant to be really flexible for producers and an iterative process. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick so I can show you. Can you guys see that?
We did.
Is it back?
There you go.
Okay, so basically this is a, you know, and we're going to be working through our partner position, so this won't be, I can imagine a producer working directly with WWF if they are outside of the scope of like RSA or ACES or some of our other partners in South Dakota or Nebraska. But generally this money will be kind of transferred through these partner positions in these local groups. But basically the overview is that, you know, I'm trying to make this program really flexible for each producer, so it's going to look different for everyone. But basically, WWF will provide the resources for technical assistance for grazing plans, any sort of management assistance that is needed for the operation, money for trainings and educational opportunities, either, you know, one-on-one work or bigger workshops, cost share to implement ranch plans and grazing management. So I've been kind of trying to put together what our cost share program will be, but trying to really make it flexible and maybe cover some things that current government programs don't cover. So the things that might be out of the scope of NRCS or other agencies, trying to be able to like temporary fencing, temporary water, that sort of stuff. Monitoring, so free monitoring. So we do a baseline monitoring on the operation plus, and then 2 years after, and then 3 years after. Basically, the ranch agrees to no conversion of grasslands for 10 years, the development of a grazing management plan, which may already exist on the operation or may not. So that will be unique to each producer. The ranch agrees to the monitoring, of course, and then the training that can be really flexible. The only 2 training parts of this that would be required through WWF is just training with our monitoring partner so that people understand what's being monitored, why it's being monitored, and how it's being monitored. So it'll be soil, wildlife, other indicators, and then a training on ranching for wildlife. I mean, similar to kind of what RSA did I suppose that was like a month ago already. And then we provide funding for financial planning and grazing management as well. So if someone wanted to go to ranching for profit or whatever sort of school that people identify as something they would like to do. So this is generally the timeline for 2021. This is a 5-year program. Currently, the program is funded for 5 years, but I could see it being funded for way beyond that. I don't think the 5 years is our limit. We will begin enrolling the first producers in March, and to get that initial monitoring done on your site, you'll have the producer would have to be enrolled by May. If they enroll after that, no big deal, but just the monitoring wouldn't happen until 2022. Then we do some of our training for, the ranching for wildlife and the monitoring training fairly early on. And then after that, it gets pretty flexible. So the people enrolled in the program would just begin working with partner positions at the different organizations to figure out sort of training they want to do, planning for their ranch, and starting to identify cost share projects. That is the really quick and dirty version of the program. And I think the most important thing about it is that it's meant to be really flexible, and it may change from year to year in terms of figuring out, like, we might get through this first year and realize something isn't working or we need to do something different. And it's meant to be adaptable for everyone's needs. So I will stop there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. It's not, it's focused in Montana, central and eastern Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska. We're hoping to work with, over the 5 years, maybe 150 to 200 producers. So, but I imagine the first year trying to keep it fairly small, just to kind of work out the kinks, and then after that, seeing enrollment in the second and third year getting a little bit bigger and bigger.
Thanks, Alexis. So, questions? I'm curious, Steve Wanderaas, I mean, are these any things that might help out in your part of the world?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we need a group like ACES or RSA in our county to make all this happen. That was one question I thought of. Can an individual just get involved in this?
Yeah.
Directly with WWF?
Yeah, so I'm kind of working on that right now. So anyone that's sort of out of maybe ACES or RSA geography, I mean, my background is working directly with ranchers on programs. And so I think that, I don't think at WWF, a lot of the work has just been kind of that, a lot of it hasn't been working directly with producers from the WWF staff time. But that to me is like, how do we work in places where we don't have like partner groups? And I think that because this program is so wide in terms of the geography, that I'm working on developing a way that we can still work with producers even if they don't have direct access to like Winnett, ACES, or RSA. So yes, the answer is yes, that we'll have that figured out.
Yeah, so we probably need to talk a little bit behind the scenes on this one then.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, you're welcome, Steve. And I was also thinking about some of the funding for, CRP, like the next chunk of money coming in that might, the conservation district might be able to access some of that to help those producers in your county.
Okay.
Well,
all right, we'll chat.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you.
I think, we look at that whole CMR area that, we got all these different, we got the CDs and these different groups that are a combination of CDs and NGOs and government agencies. And, at the end, it's all about protecting these large great ground and keep it in grassland, and just trying to figure out how many different things we could throw at the wall that'll stick, that'll work. and people are getting pretty remarkably creative. And so it's just fun today having both, you know, an FSA perspective and their opportunities and challenges, and then these local perspectives and opportunities and challenges. But other questions for anybody?
Bill, I just wanted to share to Steve. Steve, I'd also like you to know that one of our RSA long-term goals and values is creating systems that are replicable. So if there are things that you heard here today that RSA or ACES are doing, that one of our organization's missions is to be able to share that with other communities and help other communities achieve similar goals. So like I said, if there are things that we can help with or share some history or some background or things that we've or our leaders have done in the past, where we would love to do that, or put you in touch with some of our board leaders who have been with the organization from the start. They're all great resources.
So I flat out have a question, I guess, that for RSA, how involved is your conservation district with RSA?
I'm gonna let Martin answer that.
Yeah, so in my previous position, I was a Sage Grouse Initiative partner biologist in the NRCS office, and I was hired by SWCDM. So I spent my time then basically bouncing between the conservation district here and RSA is kind of like my extra partner outside of NRCS. So now that I'm not there, the Phillips Conservation District Administrator has been coming to more meetings, and I keep her in the loop pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So fairly involved. I haven't figured out how to get any money out of them yet, but I'm working on that. So we try to keep them involved.
With ACES, we're very involved with our conservation district, because I'm actually an employee of the Petroleum County Conservation District that, I guess for lack of a better term, I'm a loan to ACES. So, and Carrie does a phenomenal job, and she does so much for us with our grant administration and bookkeeping and everything else. So the lines are definitely blurred between us and them and the NRCS for sure.
Yeah, I'm really familiar with the CD involvement over there, and I'm really impressed by those folks. So, thank you.
Carrie leaves, I'm probably gonna leave. So I know she's on the phone.
Yeah, administrators are really important.
Yes.
Yes. All of you administrators out there. So we got about 25 minutes left in the program. Liv, I'm just checking in with you. How are we doing?
We have two more people on our panel that we need to get to still. So
Very good.
I see a question that's in the chat box from Autumn. We're going to circle back to that at the end. I will let Steve Riley with Northern Great Plains Joint Venture and Ducks Unlimited go next, and then we'll have Veronica after that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. A lot of what we do has kind of been covered in the general sense. One of the things that Northern Great Plains is working on, and just to give a real quick and dirty sense of where we exist in Montana, is basically south of the Missouri River and east of the mountains. So everything that's pretty much grass or once was. And so, one of the things that joint ventures are really designed to do is really kind of intervene in a geographic space that is somewhat similar. So, everything is divided up into, the whole continent is divided up into these joint ventures that largely represent ecosystems that are generally the same. So we run from, the entirety of West River, as you would call it in South Dakota. So everything west of the Missouri River, and then North Dakota, everything west and south of the river. And then that bleeds over into Wyoming as well. And what we try to do is work with everybody. The joint ventures have a management board, and we have a bunch of different committees that we can stand up, technical people, conservation delivery people, whatever we as a group think needs to happen. And I'd encourage you to go take a look at our website, which is just NGP or ngpjv.org, and take a look at the people who serve, different organizations that serve on our board. And that only is just the start of it, because we partner with lots more people than are represented, lots more groups that are represented. So folks like ACES and the RSA and World Wildlife Fund, well, they're actually on our board. Anybody that we think can help kind of meet our objectives, and really folks who kind of represent kind of an intersection in a Venn diagram of our objectives and their objectives, so we can work together. We do have, as Brent kind of alluded to, we have a program ourselves that is called the Grassland Restoration Incentives Program, where we just received our third NIPWIP grant, one which was a Northern Great Plains grant, and two that were Spirit Awards that all helped to pay for some projects. We've worked with partners, including ACES, to put in around, I think I counted 22 projects at this point in time in all 4 states. The most recent grant that we received is about $128,000. So we'll be trying to continue to grow the Northern Grassland Restoration Incentive Program, and working with everybody to try to maximize benefits. One of the ways I like to look at what we're doing is kind of thinking of a chain and trying to figure out what the weak links are. And a lot of weak links have been talked about today, whether that's capacity or just a understanding of kind of what we can and can't do with different programs, and just bringing everyone together so that we can bring all of our strengths to overcome all of our weaknesses, if you will. Just want to mention a little bit, we talked about capacity, and that's, you can get lost in the vagaries there. One of the things that I like to think of when I think of capacity is, for every group like ACES or RSA or Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, what can we handle? What would our size allow us to do? And what kinds of things can we do? And, a lot of times we focus on trying to put folks like Martin on the ground to go and intervene and work with producers, which is really, really important. It's already been mentioned that, relationships are everything when it comes to doing conservation. If you don't build that first, you don't get very far. You can only buy yourself so far into this stuff. You really have to, it's based on trust. So that's really important, having people locally that can go out and work with ranchers and farmers and talk through some of the programs and some of the reasons behind the programs, and design some of the conservation elements that would help overcome whatever it is that they're trying to overcome. But you also have, as was mentioned, administrators are really important. And so you kind of are limited by how much can you administer in terms of people, in terms of grants, in terms of individual projects. All of those things come together. I mention that because I think, this conversation today really gets at the heart of that. That it's been recognized that, federal programs are limited by the fact that one size kind of has to fit the whole country. And you can only drill down so far in the programs without them becoming overwhelming. And so an artifact of that is that there's some weak links left. What do you do if you don't have enough cost share to entice people into a practice? Well, you set up some sort of a local system to try to overcome that. Maybe engage National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, come up with some funds, maybe work with various donors from various organizations to help and drill down to fixing those weak links in the chain, so that those federal programs, the two largest of which are CRP and EQIP, actually can meet the really localized needs that we have. And I think in the process, getting everyone involved, everyone becomes a lot more informed about, you know, what you can do and how you have to go about doing that to have some success, and also what other people care about. In our case, the Northern Great Plains Joint Venture, we're a all bird joint venture. So we kind of have the philosophy that if we can get the habitat back to where it supports the birds, it's going to support everything else in the economy that we need there, particularly in ranch country. So, you know, having healthy working ranches that, you know, the ranchers themselves can afford to stay on the ranch and pay for the things they need and send their kids to college and all of that. And at the same time, manage those native grasslands so that they are conducive to the life cycle of these birds. I think everything is lifted up. Maybe, you know, 20, 30 years ago, maybe when we started CRP, we weren't quite thinking that way. And now I think we are. So we're asking the right questions, and we're working with our neighbors, trying to get things done and helping each other. And, you know, that's really the ultimate solution to this, is just to sit down, roll up your sleeves and try to figure out what needs to be done, what's available to do it, what's missing, and then move forward with that. And that's really what the joint venture is here for. We are trying to figure that out. We're pretty new as a joint venture to the conservation delivery game, but because of some of the things that we're faced with, particularly in the bird community, where we know we've lost nationwide, 1/4 of the birds since 1970 have gone away. And that's even worse in the grassland systems. It's far worse, more like 40% of the birds are gone since 1970. And the trajectory is awful. It's going down and down and down. And so unless we want to wake up one morning and never see another sharp-tailed grouse, you know, that we got to band together and do something about it. And so we're looking at it from that angle. We know that the ranchers are looking at it from a whole bunch of different angles, one of which is maintaining their culture, which is wonderful and fits right in with what we're trying to do. And, you know, I think the more we can pull that together and the more we recognize the bigger questions and trying to really answer those hard questions, the more likely we're going to be successful.
Very good, Steve. Veronica, you're next, and what looking forward to what you can share.
Hello.
Good to see you, Veronica. It's been a while.
I know. I remembered your voice though, as soon as I signed on. Yeah, so I'm here with the NRCS in Circle, so McCone County, and we are working on addressing expiring CRP or recently expired CRP. So we have, you know, a figure of over 65,000 acres coming out over the 4-year period. And, you know, we're using Montana focus conservation, so targeted implementation plans. We currently have one in southern McCone County. And that one is actually called Improving Grazing Land Health and Ranch Viability. And it includes 50,000 total acres estimated for treatment. But there is an emphasis on CRP, whether they're expired or expiring, and that is currently ongoing. So we're working on plans in the southern part of the county, and there will be a couple more years of sign up for that targeted implementation plan. At the same time, since I've started, we've looked at what the forecast is for where the CRP is going to be coming out, and I've been working with producers, and as it's expiring or it's going to expire, and there is interest throughout the county, so we are submitting a new targeted implementation plan, sort of to go hand in hand with the one in the south part of the county, looking at the northeast, where primarily that's other CRPs coming out. And that one is titled Maximizing Conversion of Expired CRP to Healthy Productive Grazing Land with an estimated 24,000 acres. And the idea is to provide the opportunity to landowners that are interested in grazing or leasing it out for grazing. Practices that we include included in the previous plan as well as in this one include new fencing, fence removal. A lot of the CRP was fenced off, so if we want to maybe do some grazing, better grazing management, that can include that. And then oftentimes these CRP acres don't have any water development, so we're looking at doing wells. In some cases, the land is kind of isolated, so there needs to be a well. In some cases, we can tie into an existing well. Some cases, the existing wells are old, so that just takes a lot of different planning, and we're working with landowners in the south, and I'm learning a lot about what it takes to make a good plan, and then looking at different grazing management opportunities. In some cases, given where that CRP is located, that presents different challenges for a rotation, but in some cases, we can make it work. So it just depends. But, you know, we are working with quite a few in the south part of the county, so we expect to have a lot of interest if we do get funding for the north part of the county. Another thing is, you know, I have worked with some agricultural producers on their interest in renovation. So renovating these stands is in a lot of cases has been required for potentially CRP re-enrollment. And so we do have sort of 5 different recommendations we've given to try and fit the 12-month window for getting that done. Haven't, you know, done too much of that just because given the difficulties of that, but we are kind of trying to learn about what are some ways that these stands could be renovated if producers are interested. I've heard of different things with a few years of cover crop and then grass seeding, but that is also something that has come up since I've been here. And then another thing that's I heard mentioned quite a bit is capacity. So I'm currently the only, I guess, full-time staff member here, but we do have Jordan, Garfield County support, so Sue Fitzgerald and the Jordan staff do come, and Cami Kilwine is the acting VC, so we do have some assistance, but we are hoping to maybe get some more staff here. And then we are getting a new employee, I think, in June. So hopefully we can really work with producers in the county to retain it in grass, but also maximize it for grazing, and, you know, at the same time create healthy, productive ground out of it. It has been idle in some cases for a really long time, so another consideration is providing economic opportunities within the county for, you know, in some cases younger producers who are interested in leasing it, and so that is another consideration with the work that we're doing in McCone. That's all I have. I don't have any slides.
It's great, Veronica. Yeah, it's been a while because I didn't know you were in Circle now. So now I learned something. So there's about 8 minutes left. Oh, yes, Steve, please. Because I was just going to open it up to then let Liv kind of finish it off here.
I just want to add, as far as office capacity, Bird Conservancy of the Rockies has stepped up, and we're going to have a half-time employee in the office. And I guess that's really all I had to add. So thank you. And thank you, Veronica, for your presentation.
Steve, it's so great to see that you're into birds. Liv, how do you want to finish this off? It's been a great program, and God, a lot of great voices.
Yeah, it certainly has. So we do have time for a few more questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I see Dick has one, but before I go to Dick, I'm going to ask a question that's in a chat box quickly. Autumn asked RSA, who is assisting producers with grazing management plans, do you work with a contracted range specialist, or is this something that Martin specifically is working with producers on?
So I have a range background. With SGI, I was a range conservationist, so I did a lot of grazing planning there. With RSA, really, it's been so focused on wildlife for us to show our benefit as far as the metrics we're tracking. We haven't been pushing a huge grazing metric, but we make it an effort to never single taskedly work with someone on just one issue. We try to make sure it's being incorporated into their ranch. So I usually go over what that producer is doing for a grazing plan. And then the other end of my spectrum is I really hate taking pre-made solutions and making them the answer to somebody's specific problem. So I don't ever try to make it a hard days numbers plan. As long as that producer can explain to me that they're grazing with purpose and we're trying to maximize some grass recovery, I'm pretty good with that. But we do bring that up, and then anything that will help them advance on that spectrum of intensity is something we try to help add into a project. And I guess for that outcome, I'll share this real quick. This will make Steve Riley at least mildly entertained, I think. As part of our projects, Partners for Fish and Wildlife does our legal agreements, and they do bird monitoring on every project. Here is a category for expired CRP grazing enhancements, and it shows that on all of our projects that just simply put grazing infrastructure on CRP, it showed an increase in Sprague's pipit populations when they were monitored. So it's just a very simple thing we can do that's having a benefit to grassland birds.
Great, great.
Interesting. Thanks, Martin.
Yep.
Dick, we'll go over to you. What's your question?
Maybe it's more of a statement or whatever. I want to thank Steve and your conservation district for putting this on. CRP is a big thing, and I think Carrie's too young to remember, but actually all this HEL, highly erodible, non-highly erodible, and CRP, a lot of this got started in Petroleum County before we even knew what a sodbuster was. And then when the federal people tried to, Bill, you might remember some of this, but tried to come up with something for the erosion, it was the Petroleum Conservation District that came up with one of the original ordinances that they tried to pass. And so then we got CRP that came along with this HEL program, the 85 Farm Bill, and it wasn't a perfect program. I had, it put a lot of farmers in grass, put a lot of businesses out of business. I had machinery dealers and fuel dealers show up at my office and explain how we were putting them out of business, and it was true. And you'd have people my age in their 60s going into CRP, and the next day their kids would come in and say, you know, you just put me out of business. I've got to go get a job in Billings or move away. So I guess I respect a lot of individuals think CRP has saved a lot of soil and done a lot of good stuff. It has, but it was a cost to society, a big cost. And I guess now we're sitting here, we got this CRP coming out. And I guess I would encourage all of us, maybe it can start with McCone or Petroleum, to look back what you did early on when there was sod busting issues. It was try to solve the problem and try to work at the national scale, which it did happen sort of that way. And I would encourage, I think Les and Shanan alluded to it, that it isn't a perfect program, and maybe we locally, working with our legislators, can work at the national level and get this thing fixed. You know, probably nobody would like more than me to see young farmer ranchers be able to take over this land. Right now, there's a lot of disincentive to do it like it was back in '85 when they come up with CRP. And so I feel sometimes for the wildlife organizations, I felt that way to some degree when people would come and sit in my office and say, you're going to put me out of business, we don't trust you, you know, that sort of thing. So I guess I would encourage Steve for you to somehow get to the grassroots of these farmers and see what can be done. Maybe something with CRP can be retooled so young farmer ranchers can get into it. There's an incentive for older people to work with them and get out of it. And we can have all the conservation we want. I think of Aldo Leopold that everybody quotes. If you look at it, his one famous quote was, if the landowner does well and his land does well, everybody is good. If one of those things doesn't work, it doesn't work. So we will not have conservation until the farmer rancher is successful in making a living. So, I mean, that's just my little preaching. I encourage you, Steve, and everybody to try to get a grassroots thing going up above to get CRP fixed, because it definitely isn't working. That's all I had.
Yeah, Dick, good preaching, Dick. I think we all, I think you just underscored just how interdependent all these issues are. And that just underscores why we have to have all these different people talking to each other to try and figure out, you know, this formula that actually keeps land working, keeps communities working. And I think everybody's trying to do that, but it's pretty darn complicated. But Liv, where are we going now?
Well, I don't see any more hands raised, so I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions. Honestly, I feel like Dick's comments were a great segue to our closing too. I mean, we talk about communities and conservation, the two come together. They're interchangeable, especially in this group, community working group. So that's what makes our group work. Thank you all for joining us, for having these conversations. We wouldn't be productive unless we had them. So thank you for joining us. Even though this is a virtual format and conversation looks different, it's incredibly valuable to have these conversations. So unless any more hands go up, I think that we can probably close.
Yeah, just a special thank you to the panelists and your preparations. It just generated a lot of good questions and conversations. So
yeah,
Liv, thanks for your organizing.
yes. I will, I'll send the meeting recording off as well as the slides that I received from presenters. And as long as it's okay with all of the people on our panel, I'll also share your contact information in case there are any follow-up questions for folks. So look for that in your email as well.
I will appreciate that contact info. I was just looking in my emails to see if I had that for Alexis, and I don't.
I will definitely share that.
Thank you.
Great.
Wonderful.
Guess we're done. I just, you know, a year from now, Steve and Veronica, I hope we have some projects out there that are really kicking butt.
Me too.
Very good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Goodbye.